Prince Harry thought he had already endured the worst the monarchy could throw at him. He had faced betrayal wrapped in royal courtesy, silence disguised as dignity, and manipulation cloaked in tradition. But nothing compared to the storm that broke the moment he stumbled upon what was never meant for his eyes. A file buried deep within the palace's confidential archives, a quiet document carrying a name that made his heart stop. The Rebranding Diana Initiative. The title alone felt like a blade twisting through the fragile piece he had tried to build. His pulse quickened. He read the first line once, then again, not believing what it suggested. A project, commissioned and approved by senior palace officials, designed to modernize public memory and reshape historical associations with the late Princess of Wales. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, Harry thought it had to be some kind of misunderstanding, a bureaucratic phrase, cold and detached, that didn't mean what it seemed to. But the more he read, the clearer it became. This wasn't about preserving Diana's story. It was about erasing it. Names began to jump out at him, familiar and unsettling: Camilla's senior aides, communication strategists, PR consultants who had previously worked on her image rehabilitation. Even members of the royal household he once trusted were listed under strategic coordination. Each paragraph was worse than the last. Reallocate media emphasis, one note instructed. Limit references to outdated emotional narratives. Another, more chilling line read, integrate Diana's charitable legacy under current leadership for continuity and control. Continuity and control. Two words that burned into his mind like acid. Harry leaned back, the weight of the discovery pressing against his chest. The woman who had once replaced his mother in his father's life was now replacing her in history. Diana's compassion, the very quality that once threatened the monarchy's stoicism, was being rewritten into something polished, managed, and soulless. It wasn't enough for them to have survived her spirit, now they were trying to consume it. He could almost hear Camilla's smooth, commanding tone echoing through those gilded corridors, cloaked in charm but sharpened by ambition. She had always understood the power of image. Now, she was using it as a weapon. He scrolled through the attached documents, desperate for a mistake, a misunderstanding, a reason to believe this wasn't deliberate. But it was all too precise, too calculated. There were scheduled timelines, press briefings, even draft speeches. Each item formed a pattern that painted one undeniable truth. Diana's story was being systematically dismantled piece by piece, and the world would never even know. Her charities were already being quietly absorbed into new royal initiatives, her portraits gradually removed from official premises, her influence fading not through time, but through design. For a long moment, Harry just stared at the screen, unable to move. The cruel irony stung. His mother had once fought for the same cause as Camilla, now sought to claim as her own. Where Diana had used empathy, Camilla was using strategy. Where Diana had rebelled, Camilla controlled. And where Diana had been silenced, Camilla was rewriting the script entirely. He could feel the pulse of anger rising in his veins, not just for what they were doing to his mother, but for what it meant about the institution itself. If they could erase Diana, what else could they bury? That night, sleep refused to come. Every memory of his mother returned in flashes: her laughter, her voice, the way she once told him, "They fear love because they can't control it." Those words now carried new meaning. He realized that this wasn't just about image, it was about ownership of memory, of legacy, of truth itself. And he was faced with an impossible choice: stay silent and watch history be rewritten, or fight the machine that had already taken everything from him once. As Harry dug deeper into the palace's hidden files, what began as a shocking rumor unraveled into a calculated campaign that reached the throne itself. Behind the immaculate facade of Clarence House, the heart of royal diplomacy pulsed with quiet deceit. The corridors may have echoed with polite laughter and the clink of silver, but beneath that refined veneer, something darker was taking shape. Hidden meetings, unrecorded minutes, and whispered strategies unfolded under Camilla's discreet supervision. It wasn't just governance, it was orchestration. The council she assembled was small, deliberate, and fiercely loyal. Officially, they were gathered to modernize the royal narrative. Unofficially, their mission was to erase a ghost, the woman whose shadow still haunted the monarchy from beyond the grave. They called it the Royal Image Council, a name that sounded harmless enough, yet its purpose was anything but. Hand-picked advisors, press liaisons, and reputation architects filled its ranks, each sworn to absolute confidentiality. Camilla presided over the sessions with a polished calm, her voice steady but firm. "We cannot build a modern monarchy if we are still living under Diana's shadow," she declared, her words slicing through the silence like glass. Around her, a few uneasy glances were exchanged, but none dared to challenge her. Everyone in that room knew the stakes. Camilla wasn't asking for approval, she was issuing a decree. The strategy was clinical, even brilliant in its precision. It began with language words carefully re-engineered to reshape memory. Public documents and official briefings quietly replaced Diana's humanitarian legacy, with phrases like the Queen Consort's continuity of compassion. The plan moved fast. Charities that once bore Diana's personal touch were slowly absorbed under new umbrellas. Old photographs disappeared from halls and brochures. Events once named in her honor were rebranded under Camilla's renewal initiatives. Nothing overt, nothing loud, just a gradual fade, so subtle the public wouldn't notice until it was complete. In private, the council's press unit adopted a chilling slogan whispered behind closed doors: "Phase Diana out." It was never to be written down, never to appear in any email, but everyone understood what it meant. A controlled vanishing. Her warmth, her defiance, her unmatched bond with the public, each was being methodically dismantled. To the public, it would look like evolution. Inside the palace, it was elimination. Not everyone agreed, of course. One or two aides felt the unease growing in their chests as they watched Camilla's will dominate every discussion. A few spoke in coded caution, asking whether it was wise to reframe Diana's legacy so completely. But their voices drowned in the tide of obedience, suppressed by the weight of NDAs and the ever-present threat of exile from royal favor. Clarence House was no place for conscience, it was a place for control. Still, Camilla justified it to herself and to those who dared question her. "The monarchy must survive sentiment," she said during one late-night session, her tone calm but final. "We must control the story before the story controls us." In her eyes, Diana's lingering influence was not just inconvenient, it was dangerous. The late princess's compassion had become a mirror reflecting everything the modern monarchy struggled to conceal: detachment, privilege, fear of vulnerability. Camilla's campaign wasn't born of hatred, it was born of necessity. At least, that's what she told herself. Under her direction, Clarence House transformed into a command center of quiet power. Schedules, narratives, headlines, all were now subject to her invisible hand. She didn't need confrontation, she ruled through precision. Her plan was not to destroy Diana's image outright, but to absorb it, to dilute it until it no longer threatened her position. By the time the public realized what had happened, Diana's legacy would no longer belong to her, it would belong to the crown. Yet even in this carefully constructed silence, the truth has a way of finding cracks. One late-night memo, one misplaced document, one guilty conscience, small things that can ignite revolutions. As the council's influence expanded, so too did the unease among those who had seen too much. And somewhere within those shadowed walls, a single voice decided that the secret had gone too far. But the council's secret memos didn't stay buried forever. Someone inside decided the truth had to reach Harry. It came quietly, almost innocently. An unmarked envelope slid beneath the gate of his Montecito home. No courier. No postage. Just his name written in a shaky, deliberate hand. For a brief moment, Harry dismissed it as another strange letter from the public, one of countless messages that still reached him despite the layers of privacy he'd built around his life. But something about it, something unexplainable, made him pause. The handwriting wasn't unfamiliar. It carried an unease he couldn't name, a tremor that seemed to whisper danger even before he opened it. Inside, just a single sheet of paper, slightly creased, smelling faintly of old perfume and office ink. 5 words changed everything: "They're trying to erase her." And below, in careful but fading script, "Even her archives aren't safe." No signature. Just one letter at the bottom. He read it once, twice, a third time. The air seemed to thicken with every glance. He felt that strange hollow chill that comes when the past refuses to stay buried. It had been years since he'd left those palace walls behind, years since he vowed never to be drawn back into their secrets. Yet here it was proof that something sinister had been set in motion. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself it was nonsense, a cruel prank, another attempt to pull him into a world he'd fought to escape. But his instincts wouldn't let it go. The words gnawed at him, each one carrying the weight of his mother's legacy, each one daring him to uncover the truth. That single initial, M, haunted him. Who would risk sending this? Who would know enough to write it? His mind raced through possibilities. Could it be someone from the palace? A staffer? An ally of Diana's who had remained silent all these years? Or perhaps someone close to Camilla, someone who had seen too much and finally cracked under the pressure of her campaign. He remembered the faces from the Royal Image Council, those names buried in the classified documents he'd uncovered weeks earlier. Some of them had been loyal to Diana once, before power demanded their silence. One of them, he thought grimly, must have found their conscience. Harry placed the letter on his desk and stared at it for a long time. The California sun streamed through the windows, but all he could see was the shadow of London, the cold grey skies, the echo of footsteps down palace corridors, and his mother's voice whispering truths that no one wanted to hear. Memories of her funeral came flooding back, the procession, the silence, and the thousands who wept for her while the family behind the black veils moved like actors in a cruel performance. He remembered walking behind her coffin, his small frame dwarfed by the world's grief, hearing her words in his head, "They will try to bury the truth, but truth always finds its way." Now, years later, that warning felt prophetic. The letter wasn't random, it was a spark. It confirmed what he feared from the moment he found those files. This was organized, deliberate, and protected by people who thrived in secrecy. Every instinct screamed at him to ignore it, to stay safe, to let the past rest. But another voice, the one that sounded achingly like hers, refused to be silenced. If they're trying to erase her, you can't let them. Sleep eluded him that night. He lay awake, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling, replaying every moment of his mother's final years, every headline that tore her apart, every silence that followed her death. The anger that had once cooled into resignation began to rise again, fierce and uncontrollable. He could feel the same fire that once drove Diana when she stood alone against the establishment, speaking truths that the palace called betrayal. Maybe this was his moment to do the same, to finish what she started. By morning, the decision was made. There would be no more distance, no more hiding across oceans. He booked a flight without telling anyone, not even Meghan. The letter remained folded in his pocket, its edges worn from his restless hands. He didn't know what awaited him in London, only that something had begun, something that could not be ignored. The moment his plane touched down at Heathrow, the storm he was about to unleash had already begun forming behind palace gates. Hidden deep within the ancient corridors of Kensington Palace, there existed a place that few dared to mention, a sealed archive known only to a handful of senior royal aides and historians sworn to silence. It was called the Diana Archive, a vault said to contain the most intimate fragments of her life, handwritten letters, private recordings, and personal notes that captured not the polished princess the world saw, but the real woman behind the crown. To most, it was sacred ground. To others, it was a locked chamber of inconvenient truths. And for years, it had remained untouched. Until Harry came asking questions. The moment he requested access, the temperature inside the palace seemed to drop. At first, there was polite deflection, standard responses wrapped in royal formalities. The matter will require review. Certain materials remain restricted for preservation. Days passed, and the silence thickened. Then came the official reply: access denied. No explanation. No justification. Just 2 words heavy enough to confirm his worst fears. The refusal came not from the archivists or historians, but from Camilla's office itself, citing royal sensitivity and the need to maintain historical consistency. In the language of the monarchy, that meant only one thing: something inside that vault had the power to destroy an illusion carefully built over decades. For Harry, that denial became fuel. It wasn't simply about his mother's memory anymore, it was about control. What was so dangerous in those archives that even he, her own son, couldn't see it? He pressed harder, leveraging old connections, invoking the public's right to transparency, even threatening legal intervention through trusted advisors. Each step was met with greater resistance. Behind palace doors, whispers began to circulate that the prince had crossed a line. But Harry had crossed lines before, and this time, he wasn't turning back. When the lock finally turned and the vault door opened, the air inside was cold and still, heavy with time. At first glance, the shelves appeared meticulously arranged, boxes labeled, catalogs in order, everything seemingly preserved. But as Harry's eyes moved across the records, he felt a pit forming in his stomach. Dozens of files were missing. Pages torn from diaries. Audio cassettes catalogued years earlier nowhere to be found. The deeper he looked, the more obvious the pattern became. The gaps weren't random, they were deliberate. Letters that mentioned Charles. Notes from the late 1990s. Conversations about a woman Diana once cryptically referred to as the one he loves. The references had been surgically removed, as if someone had tried to rewrite history itself. One file in particular broke him. It was an index card dated only months before his mother's death, referencing a journal entry Diana had written about her fears that they were trying to silence her voice. But the actual entry was gone, ripped out, leaving only the ghost of her handwriting impressed on the page behind it. Harry ran his fingers over the faint marks, feeling a chill that no words could describe. In that moment, rage and sorrow collided within him. He no longer needed proof of a conspiracy, the absence of it was proof enough. He stood surrounded by the hollow remains of his mother's truth, realizing how far the machine had gone to erase her. Letters she'd written to him as a child gone. Photographs from private trips vanished. Even recordings she had made for a friend in case something happens were missing. The silence of the vault spoke louder than any denial. This wasn't preservation. It was censorship. And behind it, Harry could see the same cold logic that had driven the so-called rebranding Diana initiative. Camilla's fingerprints were everywhere, not literally, but through the quiet efficiency of her loyal aides who had turned erasure into art. For the first time, Harry understood the scale of what he was up against. This wasn't just about power, it was about narrative, legacy, and control over memory itself. His mother had warned him once that truth within the palace wasn't destroyed, it was hidden. And now, standing in that vault, he knew she had been right. Every missing page, every vanished tape, was a piece of her that someone had stolen from him, from history, from the world. But fate has a strange way of revealing what power tries to bury. Amid the labeled folders and neatly stacked boxes, there was one item left behind a single cassette tape misfiled under an unrelated code. It was old, unmarked, nearly forgotten. Whether it was an accident or an act of quiet rebellion, Harry would never know. But as he held it in his hands, he felt something shift inside him. Whatever was on that tape would become the spark that turned whispers into war. But one item in the vault misplaced, forgotten, or deliberately left behind would turn the quiet war into an open confrontation. It was buried beneath stacks of yellowing papers, a relic lost to time yet unmistakably deliberate in its hiding. A single cassette tape, small and fragile, its faded label carrying only 3 words, "For my boys." Harry's hands trembled as he picked it up. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. The air around him felt heavier, as if the past itself had been waiting for this moment to resurface. He turned the cassette over in his palms, the faint imprint of his mother's handwriting still visible through the years. He knew what it was before he even pressed play. And still, when he did, nothing could have prepared him for the sound that followed. Her voice. Soft, tired, but still carrying that unmistakable blend of warmth and defiance. "If you're hearing this," Diana's voice began, "it means my truth has been taken from me. But remember, this truth has a way of surviving, even when they bury it under lies." The room seemed to close in on him. Her words were both comfort and curse, an echo from beyond the grave whispering directly into his soul. Each sentence carried layers of fear and foresight, as if she had known what would come after her death: the rewriting, the sanitizing, the quiet manipulation of her story. Harry listened in silence, barely able to process what he was hearing. Then came the part that froze him completely. "There's a woman," Diana said softly, her tone shifting into something almost resigned. "A woman who will one day silence my name. She's clever, poised, and patient. They'll call her everything I was not. But she will make sure the world forgets me." Her words struck like lightning. There was no name mentioned. She didn't need to. Harry understood instantly who his mother had meant. The realization tore through him, leaving behind a mixture of rage, grief, and a bone-deep sadness he hadn't felt in years. The tape continued, Diana speaking of her fears, her isolation, her belief that forces around her were tightening. "They think I'm fragile," she whispered. "But fragility can be strength when the truth is on your side." Her voice cracked on those last words, and Harry had to stop the tape. His eyes burned, his breath came shallow. He had spent his entire adult life trying to protect her image from distortion, but now he realized the distortion had already been completed, and by the very people who claimed to preserve her legacy. When he finally regained his composure, a new emotion took root within him. Determination. This was no longer about personal pain, it was about justice. Diana's warning wasn't just a private message, it was evidence. proof of what she feared, what she sensed, what she predicted. He knew that keeping it hidden would make him complicit in the silence she had fought against all her life. He made a vow, then her voice would be heard again, no matter the cost. His advisors begged him to stop. They reminded him of the consequences, of how ruthless the institution could be when challenged. "They'll destroy you," one warned. "They'll turn her memory into madness and call it your obsession." But Harry was past the point of fear. The truth was no longer something he sought, it was something he carried. Late that night, with shaking hands and unshakable resolve, he reached out to an old contact in the press, one who had once sworn loyalty to his mother's cause. Within days, the world knew. The first headline broke like a thunderclap: Prince Harry uncovers Diana's final message. The article mentioned the existence of an unreleased recording, a personal confession from the late Princess of Wales that could rewrite the royal narrative. The public reaction was instant and explosive. Social media flooded with tributes, speculation, disbelief. But inside Buckingham Palace, it triggered something far more dangerous. Because for the first time in decades, Diana's voice was no longer confined to history. It was alive, defiant, and echoing across the world once more. The monarchy's PR machine roared to life overnight, determined to discredit him before the world heard what Diana had said. Camilla had faced storms before the scandals, the whispers, the icy stares from the public who refused to forget the past. But this was different. This was not rumor or gossip. This was war. Within hours of the story breaking, Clarence House erupted into organized chaos. Advisors flooded her private study with crisis reports, headlines flashing across screens, the world demanding answers. Camilla's composure, usually unbreakable, cracked just slightly as she rose from her chair and gave the order that would define her reign. "We will not be haunted by ghosts," she said, her voice sharp and final. "Not hers. Not his. We take control of the narrative tonight." That sentence became the spark that lit the monarchy's full-scale counteroffensive. The machinery of the palace roared to life, swift and merciless. Within hours, the headlines began to shift. What had started as sympathy for Harry's revelation turned into suspicion. Unverified claims. Emotional instability. Manipulated recordings. The talking points were perfectly timed, strategically leaked through familiar tabloid channels. Trusted journalists received quiet calls from royal aides, each delivering a carefully worded version of the same story. Harry had been misled, manipulated by outside influences, and was spiraling into obsession. The palace didn't have to deny the tape's existence, it only had to plant doubt. Doubt, after all, was the monarchy's oldest weapon. Behind closed doors, Camilla's fury burned cold and controlled. She met with her senior advisors daily, sometimes twice a day, reviewing every word written about her and every statement made by the Duke. To the outside world, she remained calm, a queen consort maintaining grace under fire. But inside, her patience was fraying. Every photograph of Diana that resurfaced, every trending hashtag about truth or justice, felt like a dagger twisting into her composure. This wasn't just about reputation anymore, it was about survival. She had spent decades clawing her way from public enemy to public figurehead, from the shadows of scandal to the throne beside the king. And now, Harry's actions threatened to drag her back into the fire. Her paranoia grew quietly, disguised beneath her regal confidence. She demanded daily updates on public sentiment, approval ratings, and the reactions of world leaders. "How bad is it?" she would ask, not out of fear of truth, but the dread of losing control. Every report seemed to suggest the same thing: sympathy for Diana was swelling again, especially among younger generations who saw in her a martyr for authenticity. The very image Camilla had spent years trying to reshape was beginning to fracture. In private, she lashed out at aides for not doing enough. "Contain the damage," she ordered. "I don't care how." Behind palace walls, the Queen Consort's alliance with Charles began to show strain. She summoned him for a private meeting that insiders would later whisper about in hushed tones. The tension was palpable. "You can't remain silent," she told him. "Your son is destroying everything we've rebuilt." But Charles, caught between duty and guilt, hesitated. He had always been a man ruled by appearances, not conviction. His reluctance to condemn Harry outright only fueled Camilla's fury. "If you won't act," she warned, "I will." And she did. Her team orchestrated a new wave of briefings, subtler, more insidious. Anonymous palace sources began hinting that the recording Harry found had been doctored. Analysts appeared on morning shows questioning its authenticity. Emotional manipulation, they called it. A grieving son chasing ghosts. It was a calculated strike meant to isolate him, to make him look irrational and alone. Every headline that painted him as unstable was a quiet victory for her. But even as she tightened her grip on the press, Camilla couldn't shake the sense that something was slipping through her fingers. The public's reaction wasn't as obedient as she expected. The more she fought to silence Diana's name, the louder it seemed to echo. The palace was winning the battle for perception, but losing the war for hearts. She began to see it in the eyes of her staff, in the tone of conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The crown had survived scandal before, but this felt different. This was personal. In the dead silence of her private chamber, she looked out at the city lights of London and wondered not for the first time if the past could truly be erased. Yet even as doubt flickered, her resolve hardened. She would not be humiliated again. Not by Diana. Not by her son. The monarchy's control depended on her silence, her ruthlessness, and her ability to outlast the storm. But Harry had one final card to play, something even the palace couldn't bury. It began as a blurry 30-second clip, uploaded anonymously to a foreign server with no source, no watermark, and no explanation. Within hours, it consumed the internet. The grainy footage showed Diana, sitting alone, speaking with quiet conviction about the forces that wished to reshape my memory. Her voice was steady, her words haunting. "They may control the story for a while," she said, "but the truth has its own heartbeat." That single line, unfiltered, prophetic, and heartbreakingly human, ignited something the monarchy had feared for decades, a reckoning they could no longer contain. By morning, the clip was everywhere. News networks replayed it on loop. Social media exploded with hashtags demanding answers. Hashtag Diana Speaks Again trended across continents. In a matter of hours, the late princess's voice had become a global rallying cry. What had begun as a secret within the palace walls was now a revolution of remembrance. Across London, crowds gathered outside royal residences, holding candles, photos, and signs that read "You can't erase her." The energy was electric, defiant, unstoppable. The palace gates that had stood silent for years now trembled beneath the roar of a public that refused to be silenced. Inside the monarchy, panic spread faster than the footage itself. Advisors scrambled, press officers drafted emergency statements, and public relations teams worked around the clock to manage what they called a misinformation crisis. But nothing they released could drown out what the world had already heard. The palace's refusal to comment only deepened suspicion. For every denial, 10 new theories emerged. And through it all, Harry remained silent until one message appeared on his official platform: "Let the world decide who she was." Those 9 words shattered the fragile control Buckingham Palace had left. Camilla's fury was immediate and unrestrained. She viewed the leak as an act of betrayal, a declaration of war. Every measure she had taken to suppress Diana's legacy had now backfired spectacularly. The Queen Consort's image, once carefully restored after years of public rehabilitation, was collapsing in real time. Commentators began to draw chilling parallels between Diana's warnings and the current moment. Newspapers that once championed the monarchy turned critical. Polls showed a sharp decline in her approval ratings, while Charles appeared visibly strained during public engagements, his silence interpreted as guilt. The balance of power within the palace had shifted. For the first time, the monarchy's image wasn't being defined by its courtiers, but by its ghosts. The wave of emotion wasn't limited to the UK. From Sydney to Toronto, from Nairobi to Los Angeles, vigils erupted in Diana's memory. People who had never met her felt her presence again, not through curated nostalgia, but through truth, raw, painful, and unedited. Old allies of Diana, long silenced or dismissed, began to speak publicly for the first time. Former staffers, friends, and even journalists revealed fragments of conversations that painted a clearer picture of the pressure Diana endured. Every revelation fanned the flames higher. The monarchy's attempts to restore calm felt hollow, almost desperate. They could not suppress a woman who had become larger than the institution that once tried to contain her. And through it all, Harry became the reluctant face of defiance. He hadn't planned for this, hadn't expected the world to seize upon that clip with such ferocity, but once it happened, there was no turning back. His mother's voice had been set free, and he understood that her truth could no longer belong to him alone. It belonged to everyone she had touched. The movement wasn't about rebellion anymore, it was about restoration. The world wasn't just remembering Diana, it was rediscovering her spirit. The palace's walls, built to withstand centuries of scandal, now trembled under the weight of truth. No official statement could compete with a mother's voice echoing through time. No calculated denial could erase what millions had heard. Diana was no longer a symbol of tragedy, she was a symbol of defiance reborn. And for Camilla, who had once believed she could overwrite history, the nightmare had only just begun. But the public storm was only the beginning. The true reckoning awaited inside the palace walls. When Harry stepped back into the palace, it was not as a prince returning home, it was as a son seeking truth. The walls that once felt familiar now seemed foreign, colder, echoing with ghosts of memories that refused to die. Every step through those marble corridors carried the weight of betrayal and purpose. He wasn't here to plead or to reconcile. He was here to confront the one woman who had tried to rewrite the story of the woman who gave him life. Camilla was waiting, poised behind the heavy doors of her private chambers. Calm, composed. But beneath that polished surface, tension simmered like a storm barely contained. She greeted him with the grace of a queen and the caution of a strategist. "You've caused quite the spectacle," she said, her voice smooth, controlled, deliberate. Harry didn't reply. He studied her, searching for the faintest flicker of remorse, but found only calculation. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick enough to suffocate. Then he spoke not as a royal, but as a son. His voice trembled with anger and conviction. "You can twist the headlines, change the archives, even erase her name from your speeches," he said quietly. "But you will never erase her from me." Camilla's lips tightened, but she didn't interrupt. So he went on. The words poured out of him like fire, burning years of silence. He spoke of Diana's pain, her isolation, her fear that the institution would swallow her whole. He spoke of the nights he remembered her crying, of the letters he found missing, of the tape that had torn open the truth. Every sentence cut deeper than the last. "She was the best of what this family could be," he said. "And you couldn't stand it. You couldn't stand that the world loved her more than it could ever love you." The queen consort's mask slipped for the briefest second. Her eyes hardened. "You don't understand the burden of what she left behind," she replied, her tone icy. "We all had to survive her chaos. The monarchy did. Your father did. And so did I." But Harry's expression didn't falter. "She wasn't chaos," he shot back. "She was light, and that's why you've spent years trying to dim it." The tension in the room thickened. Two worlds, Diana's truth and Camilla's control, collided in a silence that spoke louder than any argument. Finally, Camilla exhaled, slow and deliberate. "You've chosen exile again, Harry," she said, her words sharp enough to draw blood. "You think you're free, but you'll find the world is cruel without protection. You'll always be the boy chasing ghosts." Her tone was almost sympathetic, but the venom underneath was unmistakable. Then came the moment that would never make it into official records, but would linger in whispers among those who served nearby. With chilling calm, she added, "Sometimes, things have to be managed. For the good of the crown." Harry froze. The phrasing was deliberate, too deliberate. Managed. The same word used in internal reports about the missing archives, the destroyed letters, the redacted pages of his mother's life. He understood then that this was no accident. Camilla hadn't stumbled into power, she had engineered it, piece by piece, erasing the woman who had threatened to expose what the monarchy truly feared: vulnerability. His anger crystallized into clarity. "You think this is about power," he said. "It's not. It's about truth. You can't control it forever." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. His final words would become legend among those who dared to repeat them. "You can't erase her," he said, his voice calm but seething with defiance. "Because I am her legacy." Then he left, not as a defeated prince, but as a man unbound from the institution that had tried to silence him. Behind him, Camilla sat in silence, her grip tightening on the edge of the table as the weight of his words settled like an omen. When Harry walked out of the palace that night, he knew his exile was complete, but something larger had begun. Months passed, and yet the echoes of that confrontation refused to fade. What began as a storm of scandal had transformed into something far greater, something the palace had never anticipated. Diana's name, once confined to whispered nostalgia and carefully curated tributes, roared back into public consciousness like a force of nature. But this time, it wasn't just remembrance, it was resurrection. Across continents, her story was being retold, not by officials or royal spokespeople, but by the people she had once inspired. New foundations were launched in her honor. Documentaries revisited her unfiltered humanity. Campaigns revived her causes from homelessness to AIDS awareness, restoring the empathy that had once made her the world's beloved people's princess. What Camilla had tried to silence had not only survived, it had risen stronger, louder, unstoppable. Harry stood at the center of it all, no longer the outcast prince, but the symbol of something far greater, a son who had turned defiance into devotion. The world saw him now not as a rebel against the crown, but as a guardian of a legacy that had refused to die. Interviews, podcasts, global forums, everywhere he went, he spoke of his mother's truth with a conviction that pierced through royal restraint. His words weren't polished, but they were powerful. They tried to bury her story, he said once, but you can't bury love. It grows through the cracks. That one line, shared endlessly across headlines and social media, became the mantra of a movement. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the silence was deafening. Camilla's once flourishing popularity began to collapse under the weight of scrutiny. Every public appearance was met with protests, her name trending alongside calls for accountability. The same press that had once praised her transformation now dissected it mercilessly, questioning the price of her ascent. Advisors urged her to retreat from the spotlight, to preserve dignity through distance. She complied, withdrawing quietly from major public duties under the guise of health and privacy. But those closest to her knew the truth: the queen consort had been defeated not by scandal, but by sentiment. She had tried to control the story, only to be consumed by it. Charles, too, felt the tremors. Though his crown remained intact, his silence spoke volumes. He maintained his public composure, offering statements of unity and continuity, but his eyes betrayed unease. The man who had spent a lifetime managing appearances now faced a truth he could no longer suppress: that the woman he once loved and lost had reclaimed the world's heart without uttering a single new word. Those around him noticed subtle changes: Diana's portraits quietly returning to palace corridors, her charities reinstated under new royal patronage, her name reintroduced into speeches with cautious reverence. It was not an admission of guilt, but of inevitability. The monarchy had endured, yes, but it had been altered forever. The illusion of invincibility cracked, revealing something raw beneath: the acknowledgement that love and memory wielded more power than lineage or tradition ever could. Through Harry's rebellion, the world was reminded of the one truth: Diana had lived and died for that humanity mattered more than hierarchy. What Camilla had tried to erase, Harry had restored. And what Diana had once feared, the rewriting of her life, had been undone by the very legacy she left behind: compassion unfiltered by protocol, truth unshaken by time. In the end, the palace didn't fall. But neither did it triumph. The monarchy continued, reshaped by the woman it once sought to forget. Diana's image shone brighter than it had in decades, not as a figure of tragedy, but of transformation. Her laughter, her defiance, her empathy, they lived on in the millions who carried her story forward, in the son who refused to let her name fade into silence. And so, from the ashes of betrayal, rose the one truth that outlasts every crown: love cannot be erased.